I thought I'd make a little video showing my attempt at a solution for door hinge alignment without going through all the fitting and refitting that you'd have to do, but then also giving myself the opportunity to paint the hinges and the hardware just like they did from the factory. The problem I had was that couldn't get the hinge pins out, you know, with the doors attached after 50 years. They were just permanently bonded. No rust or corrosion. They did have a good amount of grease left in them, but just, especially on this bottom one, there just wasn't access to get it out. So ended up having to pull the whole hardware off. But what I was real careful to do, because I knew I was going to attempt something like this, but I didn't have it 100% mapped out. I made sure to leave as much of the original alignment kind of tracing from the paint and where the hinge was originally fitted as I could. Maybe got a little greedy there. That apex is a handy sort of alignment area, but with these old primers, you can see the kind of crust that gets left, and you have the same thing on the back side of the hinge itself, and that is your money maker. So what that gives you, I'll try to be steady here, not be that annoying YouTube video, but if you gently get it notched in, you can get it set right back how it was from the factory, and it'll be rock solid. But you're going to lose that as soon as you clean the hinge off. And even if you don't have these little primer crust bits, this trace, you can still get it outlined, you know, still get it lined up with there really well. Just paying attention to as many little key references and overlaps as you have. But this stuff has all got to come off, right, as I'm going to clean the hinge. So before I take it off, the plan is, what I've already done, this is actually my last hinge, so now I'm confident enough to make this video, but I'm going to use some roll pins, and I'm going to drill a couple small holes here, and I've got little my outline there, my tracings where I want to put those pins, and I'm going to put it in here first, and then through drill it into there, and that, while I have this all matched up, will give me the exact factory location where the door has already been verified to be aligned. And then when I grind everything off, those pins will stay, and as long as the hinge goes right back on those pins and it's a good snug fit, it's going to be millimeter to millimeter the exact same alignment. So I'll show you in a few clips here how I'm doing this, and something that maybe other people can use themselves. All right, so next we'll be drilling the holes in the hinge. After you decide your alignment, you need at least two, right, in order to hold an orientation in both axes. But it doesn't really matter where you do it. Hinge shape will probably dictate where you can put it. But I'll come back in just a second and show you what I've done. All right, so if you have a hinge with the little crusties on the back, you're going to need some way to stand it off so you can get straight holes. And so what I've got here is some of those small rare earth magnets. They do good double duty. They stand it off so the crusties don't get smashed, and I can still use them for alignment, but then also it holds down to the metal base really well. Get the punches here where I'm going to put the holes. I'm using 3/32 roll pins, which, you know, I put a set of calipers on them. They come out to 2.5 mil. The drill, 3/32 drill, is 2.3 mil. So just using metric for my standard reference. But because these tiny drill bits, they like to flex, you know, even under moderate load, they'll give a little bit of bowing to them. you still have to step up to it, because if you go to final size straight away, even with such a small drill bit, you're going to get a little bit of an oblong shape at the top and then tight fitment at the very bottom where it punches through, because at the bottom, you know, you've relieved the stress on the drill, so you don't have the bowing effect. So what I've got here is a 2mm drill bit, and then I'll finish cut with the 2.3, which will give me a pretty consistent hole. So that's what we'll do next. Because we're going after alignment, you really need a drill press for this, but this little Ryobi jobber that I have, it's pretty much hot garbage. I gave it laser beams, so you think it's great, but it's not. The head, I mean, for carpentry, this thing will be fine, but for any kind of metal, it's not like a mill. I feel like, you know, one of those cheap Chinese Harbor Freight mills still would have been a lot better than this, even if I only ever used it as a drill. So what I like to do, and I'll say this before I turn the drill on here, is even though I have the center punch, I've gone through great care to make sure that that's as centered as it can so that it doesn't try to walk as soon as I put pressure on it. But even still, when I start the drill, I'm going to just barely any pressure. I'm going to let it find its own center before I start going through. I'm going to run this dry so I can see what's going on, so I'm always real careful about pressure and heat. Really, heat's not your problem here, because any amount of pressure that would generate a lot of heat in the drill bit is going to make the drill bit bow under load, which is going to give you that oblong hole. So you're just creeping along with this first stage to try to keep it as straight as possible, and just be patient so you get a nice clean alignment hole when you're done. Hole is drilled, and now we just take that extra little bit, give us the nice tight fitment with the 3/32 bit. And this part, way quicker. You're only cutting 0.15 per side, or yeah, 0.15 per side, so there's almost no load on the bit at all. Alright, so we've got the holes drilled on size, and they're deburred. Not trying to just use a regular Lowe's or Home Depot chamfer bit. We're not trying to put much of a chamfer on there. We just want it to feel smooth like the original surface, because all these contours and junk, it's now our friend, right? So what we're going to do next is we're going to set this guy in there, and we'll get it lined up, and then we're going to slowly bolt it up just like it was. But you gotta go slow with it so that you don't move it. You know, if you go twisting the bolts too aggressively, the thing can tweak ever so slightly, and your feel is eroded pretty significantly once you start putting tension from the bolts on there. So right now I can feel like when it tries to come in and out those little notches, but you're not going to have that feel anymore once you start putting tension on it from the bolts. So you really got to sneak up on it at this step. I'll come back with you whenever I get it mostly on there. Okay, it's on there hand tight, and get the light here. You can see via reference that all of the paint lines and junk, I don't know how I'm going to show this thing to you, but you can see that she fits in there just like it did from the factory. And that's what you're looking for. This one is a good one because of the primer that was in behind those bolts. Gave some great reference marks. But even the paint lines, you can get there with it. So now we'll slowly tighten it down. We don't need it, you know, full torque, but what we need is good snug so that the frame metal and the hinge are pulled together real tight, because now we got to transfer our drill marks. I'll tighten this down and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, fully snug. Snug enough that you could test hang the door on there if that's what you want to do. I did that on the passenger side as I was kind of working through the steps of this, and it lined up exactly as it did from the factory. So like I said, I'm confident this works, at least well enough for me to try to convince one of you poor souls to give it a try. So what we're going to do now is this transfer. We're going to do it almost the same way as we did on the other side, or on the hinge side. But what we're going to do to start with is we're going to start with on size 3/32, because that fits snug in here and gives us good alignment. And we're just going to use this to give us our little starter divot, making sure that we're holding it aligned. And then we're going to go back down to the 2 mil and drill all the way through, so that we can repeat the process of just using the 3/32 to come back on size for the pins. That way we're not wallering out any of these holes or losing our fitment. Doesn't matter where these are. I'm pretty sure I said that earlier, but you just need to find a spot based on your hinge and the bolts where these two will go, and you can get them far enough apart that they actually give you good alignment. But the transfer of these holes and the tightness of the holes, that has to be on the money. Otherwise, the alignment won't work, and you can have a couple millimeters of slop, which will give you that binding in your door movement. All right, so I'll start 3/32 just to get the whole start centered. Then I'll go down to 2 millimeter, visually keeping this thing centered and on site, or on, how to say that, keeping it aligned. Go all the way through with a 2 mil on both of them, and come back 3/32 on size. You can see here I've got the good taper on both of them, nice and centered. So we're ready to start the 2 mil, drilling all the way through. Just keeping the bit clean so I can see how centered I am in the hinge. All right, now we go to 3/32 for the cotter pin, or the roll pin. It's still important to be centered because this drill bit does make contact with the sides, but it's going to have low resistance. Okay, they're on size. Before we start putting in the pins, here's the, where am I at? There we go. Here's the pin. This is the very first hinge I did. This is an example of, so first one, I made the mistake of going straight to size, right? And it's obviously, it's a snug fit, but it's a little too loose because it goes right through. This one, I did the step, but I still wasn't careful enough about the load, and so you can see I get most of the way in there, but it still has friction before it breaks through. Now, with my advanced skills, you notice even at the outset, I've still got a snug fit going here, which is what we're aiming for. So, didn't start off on the best, but we're going to end with a good one. Now we're just going to send it home. Leaving about 1/8 of an inch sticking out. Okay, this is where we're at. Now we take the hinge off. Okay. Now we can grind everything off, make it all clean metal. We can clean these guys completely off, replate them, whatever we want to do, and when we put it back, it'll be exactly where it was from the factory. So hopefully this helps everyone out. One more point. Because these are all going to be slightly different, since we did all our markups and measurements by hand, they are now fixed to the exact spot. So either I'm going to have to clean these up one at a time and install them so I don't possibly get them mixed up, because I can't put them all together to degrease and remove the paint, or I'm going to have to go buy some stamps and stamp these for their location so they go exactly where they're supposed to go. That's the one other gotcha that can happen with this process. But otherwise, I'll now be able to reinstall these doors. They'll be exactly right from the first try, and I don't have to go through any jacking around, and I get the added benefit of doing the paint exactly the way it was done from the factory, covering the bolt heads and everything. Have a good one, and good luck with your restorations.